I want to introduce Terry Zobel, who is one of our founding members on what was the Archdiocesan Forum for the RCIA, which is now Initiation Ministry Partners as we come up to the change of name to OCIA. So Terry, I am handing it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. As Michelle said, my name is Terry Zobel. I'm from St. Thomas Aquinas Parish in Alpharetta, Georgia. I've been involved in the initiation ministry for 39 years, coming up on 40, which is pretty amazing when I think about it. I have a master's degree in religious education and a focus in adult faith formation. Thanks to my parish who allowed me to go to school and get some further training. It was a real blessing. If any of you are new joining us, we'd love to have your name in the chat and the parish that you're from. And if you would be so kind, it would be great if you could let us know if you're the director of initiation ministries in your parish, or if you're a sponsor coordinator or a team member of another stripe, whatever you are, it would be helpful for us to know that too. So this workshop is going to be divided into two parts. The first part is part one, the role of the sponsor. And then part two is going to be about sponsor recruiting, sponsor formation, and nurturing the sponsors. And as Michelle said, the PowerPoint slides along with the recording will be available as soon as the video is edited, and it'll be posted on the website. So if you don't get everything down in this first listening, it'll be available for you at a later time. I'd like to begin with a song that I really think in many ways says everything that I'm going to say today. It's called The Servant Song. So Adolfo, if you can start playing that. For those of you who know it and would like to sing along, please do, but stay on mute. Thank you.
Let me be your servant, let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey, we are travelers on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. I will hold the Christ light for you in the night time of your fear. I will hold my hand out to you, speak the peace you long to hear. I will weep when you are weeping, when you laugh, I'll laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we've seen this journey through. When we sing to God in heaven, we shall find such harmony, born of all we've known together, of Christ's love and agony. Will you let me be your servant. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too.
Okay, Adolfo, next slide, please. I hope you enjoyed that song. I don't know whether you sing it in your parishes, but we do. And I hear Pope Francis calling us to accompaniment, which is really the role of the sponsor. So that song will be there on the slides for you to pray with as you're thinking about recruiting and training and nurturing sponsors. So what does the rite itself have to say about sponsors? There was a book that came out years and years and years ago by Father James Dunning, who was one of the first to help us to learn to implement the rite of Christian initiation of adults. And the book was called New Wine, New Wineskins. I'm sure you can, it's probably out of print, but I'm sure you can still find it on Amazon or someplace because it's a wonderful read if you haven't read it. But I wanted you to see this chart because if you notice in the left-hand column, it says the Society of Ministers. In other words, who are the ministers of the rite? And the first line says those mandated. And then if you move to the right, you see the catechist, but then you see the sponsor. Note that the ministry of sponsor is among the very first of those mandated. And what I like about this diagram is that it shows how the entire community has a role in the initiation of new members. So you might want to reflect on this diagram after the workshop today and absorb, everything that it's trying to show you there. If we could go to the next slide. The rite itself in the general introduction at the very beginning of the rite. Now I'm working from the rite that we still have and that we're still using. But my new ones just came a few days ago. So, I'm working from the rite that we all have, which, doesn't have, the new one doesn't have too many changes to it. So I'm pretty confident that what you're seeing here is not going to be shredded and redone. But this is from the general introduction. And in paragraph number 8, it says, it is a very ancient custom of the church that adults are not admitted to baptism without godparents, members of the Christian community who will assist the candidates. Now, in the former rite, the one that we're dealing with, the old one, often uses candidate when in our language, it would be catechumen. I think in the new text, you're going to see the word catechumen there. At least in the final preparation and so on. Okay, number 9 says, especially in those latter rites, which would be the scrutinies and so on, you need the godparents there. And their job, it says in number 9, is to testify to the faith of adult candidates. Then number 10 talks about the fact that they are chosen by the catechumens or the family or the parish priest, in our case, our sponsor coordinators. And then there are 4 different subsets underneath number 10 that describe what the role of what are the qualifications to be a godparent. Okay, and it says that they need to I'm looking at number 1. They can't be the parents. And number 2 says that the responsibility of a godparent requires that they be mature enough to be a sponsor, okay? And that they must be at least 16 years of age unless your local bishop has changed that. And then the third thing is that those designated as godparents have to be fully initiated themselves. They have to have celebrated the sacraments of baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist, and be a practicing Catholic. And number 4 says they have to be canonically free to carry out that office. In other words, they cannot be someone who's been married, divorced, remarried without an annulment. In other words, they have to be able to participate in the sacraments themselves in order to be able to sponsor someone who is seeking initiation in the church. Okay, next slide. The next section in the right, in the very beginning, talks about the ministries and offices. And what I want you to pay attention to in this one is that number 9 says that the initiation of adults is the responsibility of all the baptized. None of us gets a free pass on this. The whole community, it stresses, must always be fully prepared to help those that are seeking initiation. And then there's a subsection under number 9 that elaborates the responsibilities of the community during each period, which is very informative. If you've never read that, you might want to take a look. And then it lists the ministers in this order. Number 10 says sponsor. Number 12 says the bishop, then priests, then deacons, then catechists. Now, you know, when you have rites from the church, they put things in order for a reason. And what that clearly shows you is kind of the pecking order here, that the most crucial person involved is the sponsor. And those of you who are catechists may feel greatly diminished by this because often catechists think that they're doing, you know, that they've got the load, that they're the ones that are doing all of the work of initiation. But the rite speaks differently and says, oh, no, it's those that are accompanying them. Why do you think the rite puts the participants in initiation in that order? I think it's because we're a sacramental people, and we believe in the fact that God comes to us with skin on. And so the one who's going to be beside you and holding your hand is that sacramental witness, the one who says, I will be there for you. I am willing, as the song said, to hold the Christ light for you. So I really think that's got something to do with it, that it's linked to our view of sacramentality, that we have to put skin on, reality on this whole journey. So the next slide, what does it mean to be a sponsor? Well, much of what I'm going to share in this section comes from a book called Guide for Sponsors, written by Father Ron Lewinsky and published by Liturgy Training Publications. If you don't have a copy of this book, I would highly recommend it. It's in its like 4th edition, or maybe even the 5th edition now. Mine is the 4th edition, but I think there's a new cover on the latest one. We give this to all of our sponsors. It's that good. So I'm just going to highlight some of the sections that deal with what does it mean to be a sponsor. Well, the sponsor, if you can keep that sacramental idea going, represents the entire Catholic community. In the early church, these Christian communities are very small. It'd be 40 or 50 people meeting in a household. So, the whole community could easily sponsor someone that was wanting to become Christian. But now when we've got parishes with 3,000 families, that's like 10,000 people. It's difficult to have that pressing the flesh, for lack of a better way to say it. And so the sponsor is trying to say to the person that they're sponsoring, everybody cares about you as much as I do. So they represent the Catholic community. They're companions, travelers on the road, just like the song said. The sponsors are friends, mentors, guides, people that have been there before, people that have suffered and experienced great joy, and yet at the same time, whether it's with joy or with suffering, have been able to recognize Christ's presence through it all and can be a witness to that, a guide to that. And the fourth thing that he mentions is that sponsors give witness or testimony to the catechumens and candidates and to the community. I have a quote from an article that was in a publication that is no longer in existence. It was about the catechumenate, and it was published by Sadleir. But in this article, Sister Mary Dowd writes this. She says, the sponsor stands between the community of the faithful and the candidate. As a believing member of the community, the sponsor is in a position to give accurate information to each about the other, to witness on behalf of the community to the candidate, and on behalf of the candidate to the community. What is to be witnessed to by the sponsors is not so much what the candidate knows, but rather how well he or she is able to live in that faith. This witness is given publicly at a Mass, at the rite of sending, before we send our catechumens to the rite of election. And we ask our godparents to give a verbal testimony of how they have seen God at work in this person. And it's a very moving moment for, especially, I guess, for the catechumen to hear someone say how they've seen God in them. But also, it enlightens the community and tells the community these people are serious. They didn't fall into Catholicism because they were baptized as infants. They have chosen this path as adults, and this is what's going on in them in terms of how God is touching them and working through them to give them new life. The traits of a sponsor. A sponsor prays. Prays for himself or herself, for the strength to walk this journey with someone else. They pray for the catechumen or candidate that they're sponsoring. They pray for the other sponsors and for the team. A sponsor prays, a praying person. A sponsor listens to his or her own life. I find that some of the best people that easily fall into this role are people that are perhaps in one of our small faith communities at St. Thomas that regularly gather with others to share their faith with one another, or people who have been on a Cursillo weekend or a marriage encounter weekend, people that are able to listen to what's going on in their own lives, how God is at work, and where they struggle and where they are at peace. A sponsor actively listens to to the catechumen or candidate. Someone once said we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So they're good listeners. They're willing to share their own faith journey. They're respectful. They try to understand cultural differences, cultural values, lifestyles that may be different from their own. A sponsor serves as a bridge to the community. I kind of think of them as brokers in a way. Someone who can take you to introduce you to the people who pray the rosary, the people who serve in St. Vincent de Paul, maybe sit in on a choir rehearsal, or just expose them to all of the different ways in which the community functions and serves God. A sponsor respects the catechumen's or candidate's freedom to probe, to question, to wrestle with God, like Jacob did, and to make their own choices about whether or not this is right for them, if it's the right time for them, the right place for them, whatever. They need to have that freedom. A sponsor doesn't have to have all the answers. In fact, Jim Denning in his book says the worst sponsors are the ones who think they have all the answers. A sponsor meets them where they are. I'd like to add one more to that that's not up on the screen, and that is that a sponsor lives in the world with hope. Shows the catechumen or candidate how to live in the modern world, which is so fraught with chaos and tension and anxiety, new challenges. How do you live in the modern world with confidence, with peace, and with hope? I think that's something that that a sponsor, especially in today's world, needs to be able to embody. What should a sponsor be expected to do? Well, in our parish, we expect them to attend all the sessions. If we tell them, if your candidate tells you, I can't be there next Thursday because I've got to travel, that doesn't mean they don't need to come. The sponsor needs to come, take notes if necessary, and fill them in on what happened. So we expect regular attendance from our sponsors. To be present at all the rites, to attend the sponsor training and sponsor meetings that we hold. And this is especially important, to meet outside the sessions with his or her catechumen or candidate for lunch, for coffee, maybe after Mass go out and have a donut somewhere, or have it at the parish if your parish serves donuts after Mass. But spend extra time. We joke about one of the most important places where this relationship develops is in the parking lot after the sessions. After we've packed up all our stuff and locked up and we're ready to go, we see sponsors and candidates standing beside their cars talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. And that's good stuff that's happening there. Let's see. They need to keep the team informed about the concerns of the catechumen or candidate. And to keep the team informed about their own concerns. If they're worried about either something the candidate has said or something the candidate's going through, just keep the lines of communication open with the team so that the team is informed of what's happening. And also it's important that they know that they're there for the sake of the catechumen or candidate, not primarily for themselves. I know a lot of people when we're doing our sponsor training and we ask them, so what is it that that made you say yes to our invitation to be a sponsor? And some of them will say, well, I want to grow in my faith. And that's wonderful. However, their growth in faith is a byproduct of their being willing to serve. It can't be their primary agenda. Okay, their primary agenda is to accompany the candidate or catechumen. Also, they should continue that relationship for at least a year, because it takes a long time to kind of put on the clothes of being a Catholic and to get into the swing of things, to get in that regular habit of regular Mass, to get involved in the ministry, to check in with them, to see how they're doing with their family life and their work life and so on. So that relationship needs to stay active for some time. We think of our sponsors as, I call in my head, I don't say it to them, but myself, I call them adjunct team members, that they're part of the team and they're working with us. And they're the ones that are, up close and personal and are intimately involved with the progress or lack thereof of the catechumen or candidate. So what can a sponsor expect for him or herself? They certainly renew and deepen their own faith relationship with God. But as I said, that's a byproduct of the service, not their primary purpose for being there. It just happens. I think they end up with a stronger sense of community and of belonging, and a better sense of identity in terms of themselves as a church. We've often had our sponsors tell us that they think they got more out of it than their catechumen or candidate did. Some have told us that they think every Catholic should sponsor at least once for that faith renewal that they've experienced. But they almost feel guilty that they got so much out of renewing their faith as an adult by accompanying someone else who is seeking. Okay, shall we go to part 2? Sponsor recruiting, formation, and nurturing. So first of all, recruiting. I have on my team 2 people who are I call them sponsor coordinators. One who's been doing it for many, many years, one who's relatively new to it, like 5 or 6 years, and she's younger. So she kind of looks for the young people that we need, and the other veteran is one who really knows the community at St. Thomas and knows a lot of people and just networks like crazy. We also do things like, put announcements in the bulletin, and we have a thing that we call SCDA Today that's a video. It's basically a video version of the bulletin. But this year, we had some prior sponsors give a very short 30-second to 1-minute testimony of what it was like for them to be a sponsor, and encouraged people to volunteer for that role. I do some recruiting myself with small faith community leaders. I ask them, please talk to the people in your groups and ask them if any of them would be willing to be sponsors. I also connect with the Cursillo community and say, are any of you willing to take on this role this year? So there's a lot of networking that goes on. But if I had to do the sponsor recruiting all by myself, that would be beyond the pale. So if you don't have someone on your team that can do that for you, I would strongly suggest that you find someone that's not afraid to make cold calls. I mean, these women will spend, I would guess, maybe 200, 300 phone calls to maybe get 5 sponsors or 10. It's intensive work, and they work really, really hard at it, and I'm so grateful for what they do. It's also helpful to have a sponsor pool to recruit more than you need, so that you have people that are already trained and at the ready whenever you need them. Because if you have an ongoing process, you never know who's going to show up and when, and they'll need a sponsor. So try to establish a pool. Training and formation. I think training and sponsor formation is critical. They need to understand the process, the importance of ongoing conversion. They need to know what their role is and be willing to develop the skills to fulfill that role. And we're going to talk in a little bit of detail about how we do our sponsor training at St. Thomas Aquinas. But one thing I want to tell you is we just did a sponsor training not long ago. And a few days after the training, one of the sponsors, or who we had just trained, called us and said, you know, I don't think at this time in my life I can do this. I mean, I think she realized the importance of that ministry and said, you know, I can't, not right now. Good to know, right? Better that she do that before being paired with someone than after being paired with someone. Matching. The sponsor coordinators and I sit down and play the match game. It's really fun, but it can be challenging at times. The sponsor coordinators attend the sessions so that they know the inquirers and seekers, and kind of have a handle on what they're like and what their needs might be. And then they work with me and the other catechists to find a good match. Supporting. The sponsor coordinators, myself, and the catechists meet with the sponsors to pray with them, to support them, to get feedback about how the relationship is developing between them, and to address any concerns, and to give counsel when they ask for it. Ongoing communication is critical. As I said, these are adjunct team members, and so the informal as well as formal lines of communication need to be in operation all of the time. So, sponsor training, what does that look like? At St. Thomas Aquinas, we usually do a sponsor training in a 3-hour block, often on a Saturday morning from like 9 to 12. And so we, have a welcoming time, coffee and donuts, and we have an application form that we ask the sponsors to fill out, which asks all kinds of things. If any of you want a copy of it, I'd be happy to email it to you. It has to do with, their marital status. Are they able to be a sponsor? But then it also asks questions about what are some of your interests? What are some of your hobbies? How have you been involved in the parish? Where do your interests lie? It helps us to proceed with the matching after we've done the training with them. So it's two-sided, a two-sided form with lots of questions to help us to get to know them. Then I do a presentation on what is the OCIA? What are the steps and stages? Because if they're new to this, they have no idea of what the shape of the RCIA or OCIA process looks like. I tell them that I go through the history of the catechumenate from its earliest days to its restoration after Vatican II, so that they understand its roots and its intention, its purpose, and the wonderful gift that the Church has given us by restoring that after Vatican II. I clarify the Greek words like mystagogia, that doesn't come up in normal conversation. So catechumenate, all of these terms that are, church speak that people may not be familiar with. Go through the steps and stages. And then we read the story of the road to Emmaus. And I ask them if they can identify in that story the parallels to the RCIA process. Can they find that inquiry period? Can they find the catechumenate? When Jesus says to them, "Oh, you foolish ones, so slow to understand everything that the prophets have been trying to tell you. Let me explain that to you." There's the catechumenate, right? The Lenten period, stay with us. The Mystagogia period, where they return to Jerusalem on mission, on fire with the gospel. So it helps the sponsors to feel like they're at least one step ahead of where their candidates are, and that they're in the know. They're not in the dark about what we're asking them to do. If necessary, if someone has been willing to be paired with someone who needs to go through an annulment process, that needs to be covered during that training as well, because they need to know that their journey with this person could take a while, and are they willing to accompany someone in that situation. Then we show a video that's old. Again, it's out of print, but it's very well done. And in spite of the fact that it's old, it covers the role of the sponsor beautifully. It shows two women, a sponsor and a candidate. Well, actually, she's a godparent and a catechumen, meeting each other for the first time, having, that kind of opening conversation with each other, trying to get to know each other. And then there are discussion questions for those that you're training. What did you see in that first meeting, in those first few sessions? What was the interaction like then? Then you go to the next clip, which is about the catechumenate period, where the candidate is struggling and trying to absorb stuff. And but you see the two of them at the sponsor's home talking about stuff that they didn't talk about during one of the sessions. They're talking about a miscarriage. They're talking about the catechumen's husband's experience of losing his father and how that alienated him from God and from the church. So, they're getting down into real life issues, and the sponsor is listening and caring and supporting. So it's interesting, I think, that the clip that's shown during the catechumenate is what happens outside of the sessions that we do. That's so crucial. Then there's discussion after that. What did you see going on in the relationship there? Which is, telling the sponsors in training, be prepared. Be prepared to really get to know this person. The third part of the video talks about right before the rite of election, and the person is having some doubts about whether or not to continue. And then, feeling like she's not ready, and she's not ready to do protest marches. She'd heard some talk from a nun who was encouraging social justice activity and all of that kind of stuff, and it just freaked her out. And she's afraid that she's just not at that place in her life. And so then there's discussion about that, because you see the sponsor in that section of the video strongly encouraging the candidate and saying, but look what you have been doing. You've been going to the nursing home every week and spending time with the people there. That's where you're called right now, and you're doing it beautifully. And then the last part of the video, Father Jim Dunning, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote the book New Wine, New Wineskins and other books, talks about the role of the sponsor, does a beautiful job. He uses Shel Silverstein's poem about the little boy and the little old man who walk together and wet their pants and drop spoons and whatever. It's a beautiful presentation. So we use that and find it very effective because it gets good conversation going at the training among those that are going to be sponsors, or that we hope are going to be sponsors. So then, I've got to catch back up to my slides here. Some tips for the sponsors. We ask them that when they come to the sessions and we toss out questions for the large group, or even when we're asking discussion questions for the small groups at tables, wait out the silence. Wait for the catechumen or candidate to speak. Don't jump in to fill the silence. It's their journey. We certainly want you to share, but we don't want you to jump in, and the team can wait. We can wait for the silence, because it's in that silence that God can speak. So it's all about having them remember whose journey this is, right? We also want them to know that the team is there for them, as well as for the catechumens and candidates, and that we're there to support and pray with them and encourage them in any way we can. And as I mentioned before, the parking lot is where great stuff happens. I give them lots of handouts. As I mentioned earlier, I give them that book, A Guide for Sponsors. But over the years, I've collected all kinds of materials that I give them in their packets, and hopefully they read them. Now, how about when they meet? How do they meet their candidate? We just did this last night, as a matter of fact, and I probably shouldn't do this, but I used an exercise from Stephen Ministry, which I was involved in many years ago, called a relationship exercise. And it is so much fun to do. You have the sponsors and the person that they're about to meet sit knee to knee and nose to nose, facing each other, scattered throughout the room so that they're not disturbed by other people's conversations. And what they are supposed to do is complete the sentences that I throw out, like, my name is, obviously that one's simple. I come from, you wouldn't believe how long that takes. Because people have, they have stories about where they come from. I work at, or I go to school at, or whatever I do to fill my days. My family is made up of. And of course, you've got to give them time. And as a facilitator of this relationship exercise, you just kind of have to sense the room. When are they done? When are they starting to wind down? And then you might give them a warning. Only a few more seconds on this one, and then we're going to move on, So you just work your way through it. The best thing I did during the past year was, some of my nicknames are, I feel happy when, what I do for fun is, the greatest person I've ever met is, and give some reasons for why they think that person is so great. I'm afraid of. What I dislike doing is something I regret is I feel sad when, I feel uneasy or embarrassed when. And then something I like about you is, and I'm in this RCIA or OCIA process because, and the sponsors answer that too. We had a great time with this last night, and I was joking with them about the Colbert questionnaire. I don't know if any of you are night owls like my husband and I are, but we often watch at least the monologue of Stephen Colbert before we go to bed. And he has this thing that he calls the Colbert questionnaire. And he interviews celebrities, and he has a series of questions that he asks them. And some of them are just kind of fun, like what's the best sandwich? Or apples or oranges, what's your preference? But he also asks toward the end of the question, what do you think happens when we die? And then he has another one at the very end that's the rest of your life in 5 words. So I was sharing that with them last night at the end after they had done the exercise that we normally do. And they went, woo, those are great questions. We'd love to, add those to the list. So it was fun. And it really helps establish the relationship because, if you just throw them together, it's more like a cocktail party. I don't know about you, but I hate cocktail parties. I just am not good at small talk. And those lead-in questions help people to begin to talk about themselves and to share some things that there were some people there last night who already knew each other that were going to sponsor. And I said to them at the end, did you learn something about the person that you already knew that you didn't know before? And they said, yes, we did. So it works. Trust me on that one. Also, because we want to honor the primacy of sponsors, according to the right, we do a sponsor commissioning. You could call it a blessing, whatever, but it's a liturgy, paraliturgy, that we do in the church to give it the dignity that it deserves. There's an entrance procession, which includes the lectors, the sponsors, so on. An opening song, opening prayer. The sponsor coordinator and I both are the presiders. We take different roles in the liturgy. We have a liturgy of the word. We use that with the call of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah says, oh, I'm too young. A responsorial psalm, gospel acclamation, and then John's gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. Okay? Again, Jesus puts skin on God, so these sponsors are going to do the same thing. Then I give a reflection on their call as heard in those readings. And then just a reflection song after my reflection. I won't call it a homily. And then a formal acceptance of the ministry of sponsor. The sponsors have been given a taper, which is lit from the Paschal candle. There's a blessing of the sponsors. The sponsors then recite the sponsor prayer, which is in Ron Lewinsky's book in the very beginning of it. They say that, and then they welcome the inquirer. And they say, I'm happy to welcome so-and-so into the Christian community, and they call that person forward who stands with them. And then the sponsors give them a Bible. There's a rite for the presentation of the Bible that can be done at the rite of welcoming. We choose to do it here. So they're given the Word of God, and when they're given the Word of God, they use that sign that we used before the gospel. May the Word of God be on your mind and on your lips and in your heart. And they hand it to them, and then they give them a lit candle. There's a closing prayer and a closing song. And then we have a party with wine and cheese and celebrate. So I think by doing that, it's elevating for the sponsors and godparents their role by saying this is very important, and we're going to go into the church and do a liturgy to celebrate that. But it also, I think, helps the inquirers to understand that the role that their companion is taking is serious and blessed by the church. In terms of meetings, obviously you have to meet with the sponsors to rehearse. They're the ones that should be carrying the burden for all of the rites, not the catechumens and candidates. Now, that's not to say we don't rehearse the catechumens and candidates. We do, but minimally. This is where you're going to sit. This is the part of the Mass where this rite will happen, that kind of thing. But with the sponsors and godparents, they are thoroughly rehearsed and are able to carry out that rite smoothly. We then have check-in meeting. At least, give them a couple of months to adjust to this role, and then check in with them and see how that's going, and nip any problems in the bud before they get too serious. Support and encourage them to be patient with the process. A meeting before Lent to prepare them for the scrutinies. We kind of expect a lot here during the period of purification and enlightenment. We ask the candidates, we give them some reflection questions prior to the readings of the three scrutinies, the woman at the well, man born blind, and the raising of Lazarus. And we ask them to read those readings, to reflect on the questions themselves at home, then meet with their godparent or their catechumen. Meanwhile, the godparent has done the same thing, has read the readings, reflected on them, filled out the answers to the questions, and then the two of them find a time to get together, whether it's for coffee, for lunch, for whatever, outside of the session, to share their responses with one another on what they heard in those readings and how those readings are speaking to them now. By the time the scrutiny is over and they're at dismissal, they will have reflected on these readings 5 times. They will have reflected on it individually in prayer by themselves, with their sponsor or godparent in a sharing session outside of church. At the session prior to the scrutiny, I don't call them classes, I call them sessions. At the scrutiny itself, they'll hear that gospel again, and then again at the dismissal. I think that says a lot about how one reading of gospels as rich as these is not nearly enough. That these readings are given to us from the early church because of their profound depth and meaning and layers of meaning and application for what God is asking of us now. So you can't spend enough time reflecting on those readings before the scrutinies. Then we have another meeting with them for sure during Mystagogia, kind of halfway through Mystagogia, to help them to just help the new Catholics discern, what am I supposed to do with all of this? Where is God calling me now? Why have I been on this journey? And what is God asking of me now? We try to encourage the sponsors to listen and to help them listen to their lives. If you're a young married woman with toddlers and a first grader, you're not being called to Bangladesh to serve the poor. You're just not, so to help them discern what God's asking of them with their current life situation. Where am I being called? It's not a recruiting session for, oh, you need to sign up to be a this, or you need to sign up to be a that. It's to listen to their lives and discern how God is calling them to serve him. Okay? I think the general principle of all of this stuff with sponsors is to keep them at least a few steps ahead of the catechumens and candidates. You don't want your sponsors flying blind. You want them totally clued in and well aware of what's going on and what's coming up. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. We're pilgrims on a journey. We're travelers on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. I will hold the Christ light for you in the nighttime of your fear. I will hold my hand out to you. Speak the peace you long to hear. I will weep when you are weeping. When you laugh, I'll laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we see this journey through. When we sing to God in heaven, we shall find such harmony, born of all we've known together, of Christ's love and agony. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. Amen. Thank you for being with us today. God bless you all.